All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick are at 2024 preview and prediction for the Colorado Buffaloes. Deion Sanders returns as lead man. Pat Shermer, he'll be the full-time offensive coordinator this year, also his second year on staff. Robert Livingston arrives to be the defensive coordinator. He'd been with the Cincinnati Bengals previously for over a decade. 4-8 debut season, controversial offseason, and again, more intense portal work out of the Buffaloes. Look at the offensive side of the ball. Last year, Nick, we said that this offense would be fairly good. We weren't shocked to really see them, do what they did in week one against TCU. I'd say, 45 points and, 550 yards certainly is shocking. But I expected them to put up points that day, and I thought all year long this would be a respectable unit. You start with Deion Sanders, and obviously a guy that we've always given praise to. Obviously, there's, opinions on him off the field, and, as a teammate, as an NFL prospect even. But the thing we've identified is he's a smart football player, a guy with an impressive arm, tight window thrower with good anticipation. He can stand tall and deliver, good runner. He was pretty accurate with the football. He can be a reliable runner, that is. Good mental processing. I like how he throws vertically. Operated with lots of wide receiver option routes last year. That's maybe a concern for the pro level. Needs to bulk up, though. Weaker play strength than most quarterbacks and can at times take too many sacks looking for the big play. What do you think of Deion Sanders, Nick? Obviously, a pretty controversial figure in college football, a highly popular one at that. The guy who certainly is looking to develop into more of a leader and to have some more success that maybe can put him in the Heisman race.
When you look at Deion Sanders, he's a player that's extremely talented. There's no doubt about that. He is a really strong and solid quarterback. 27 touchdowns to 3 interception ratio last year, 69% comp rate, and 3,200 yards passing are all really incredible numbers. The off-the-field antics, yes, that's certainly a problem. I'm not going to really, go on my soapbox about that. I think, we all as college football fans have seen what's going on. We all have opinions on that, and there's no need for that. I do think the biggest concern, though, is his willingness to take sacks rather than throw the ball away to try and, it looks like he's trying to save his completion percentage by not throwing the ball away or putting himself in risky situations and just taking sacks that are really unnecessary, holding onto the ball too long and trying to make something out of nothing rather than just throwing the ball away and resetting the play. He's taking sacks, putting his team further behind the sticks and making things more difficult for himself and his teammates. I think he's got to figure out a little bit more about how to work in the pocket, how to be a little bit more comfortable, bulk up as well. Certainly need to work on that. Got to avoid taking those big sacks because those sacks are going to continue to add up, take a toll on him, and continue to damage his team.
You look at the running back room, a run game that was not good one bit last year, 133rd national, less than 70 yards per contest. Obviously, it stems from having an incredibly poor offensive line that also ranks second to last in sacks allowed. A lot of turnover in this room, which is very shocking. They do add Dalton Hayden from Ohio State, a guy who has good ball security, hits the hole in a hurry. Isaiah Auguste from Arkansas ended the year with 2 good games before heading to Boulder. They have a 3-star true freshman, Micah Welch, who also figures to get some time in the rotation as an aggressive player that gets downhill in a hurry. Not much depth in this room, Nick. The top 4 rushers all transferred out. And, I'm a fan of Deion Sanders. I think it's interesting to see what he's doing with the portal. I think he's a good mentor for young men. But this is kind of concerning. Guys like Alton McGaskill, who, was great at Houston his freshman year. He seems like he had some great opportunities for him. And Dylan Edwards, he was almost brought to tears with the opportunity to play for Deion Sanders, a guy who was phenomenal in week 1 against TCU, kind of quiet the rest of the year. To see him transfer out, the vision here is completely different than maybe what we're assuming it should be, Nick. And this running back room kind of proves that, and it's kind of concerning, don't you think?
It is concerning. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense with Edwards leaving and kind of moving on after being very excited to join this program up here in Boulder. Kind of rushed out of town. A lot of turnover. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The depth is not really there. Michael Welch, a true freshman coming in at 3-star. Is he going to be able to be impactful early on? He's going to get a lot of touches early on, I think, but how much of an impact can he have? Dalton Hayden coming over from Ohio State. He's a really solid player. He looks like he's going to be the guy that has to, kind of lead the way for this offense here running the ball. He's going to be the big guy that carries the load a lot. I just don't see this offense having much success on the ground last year. They had 68.8 rush yards per game last year, 133rd in the nation, just an absolutely abhorrent number, a very, very poor number. I think they're going to have a similar number again this year. I really just don't see this team running the ball very successfully at all.
And now we're going to continue to look at the passing attack, again, led by Deion Sanders, and a great group of wide receivers. And of course, you want to start with Travis Hunter, an elite athlete with great hands. Pulls down circus catches with ease, great ball tracking abilities, absurd after the catch with shiftiness and rack. Very effective when working across the formation. This is just an incredible talent here, Nick. Another guy who's probably the most popular in college football in recent memory. A lot of people think he should maybe be a full-time cornerback. But as a wide receiver, he was a heck of a playmaker. This is a guy who they need to have on the field. Ended up having 721 yards and 5 scores. Look at the guys around him. Jimmy Horn, proven to be a good route runner, can be a playmaker downfield. Did have 8 drops last year, though. Good adds in LeJontay Wester, who's been a slot beast. 90-plus targets 3 years in a row. Has good speed and stretches the field well in the short to intermediate range. Only about 10.7 career yards per catch. Always been a big fan of Will Shepard, coming over from Vanderbilt. An impressive X. He has 17 drops over the past 3 seasons, though. He can be a good veteran that wins deep. Will mainly be a fast, agile weapon out wide. Terrell Timmons from NC State. And they also added a top 100 recruit, Deion Miller. Elite wide receiver core here, Nick. I'd say it's one of the nation's best. And like you said, their running game's probably going to struggle again. These guys are certainly going to put up some pretty good production.
This is a unit that has to be productive. This team wants to be competitive this year. I've always said that I believe Travis Hunter should just be a full-time cornerback. I personally think he's a better defensive player than a wide receiver. I think he looks really good defensively. And we're going to touch on that side of the ball for him later. That was just always my personal opinion of him coming out of high school. I thought he should play defensively full-time. I thought that was his position that was best suited for him. Although he is a talented wide receiver, I just don't think it's sustainable for him to continue to playing both sides of the ball. I'd like to see him make that full switch to defense. In my opinion, 721 yards receiving last year is an impressive number, 12.6 yards per grab and 5 scores. So if he is going to continue to be on the offense and be a wide receiver for this team, I think he's going to be very productive and be a very solid player for them. I think it would be the best decision to switch to full-time defense, but again, with the way this team is kind of set up, Hunter playing wide receiver as well does make sense for the team as a total. Jimmy Horn, 567 yards receiving, 9.8 yards per grab, 6 touchdowns for him. Good numbers there. Certainly, Omarion Miller is a nice guy. They return farther down the depth chart, 234 yards receiving, 21.3 yards per grab, and 1 touchdown on 11 grabs for him. So some nice production on limited touches. Will Shepard's a very underrated ad out of Vanderbilt, a guy that was really strong and looked really good for the Commodores last year. I like to see what he can do this year.
Omarion Miller, a guy who had 200 yards against USC. Not much the rest of the year, but clearly a playmaker can step up for them. And obviously looking at the offensive line, if this unit's going to put it together, they can certainly, score up to 40 points per game. I have no doubt about that. This offensive line can be a middle-of-the-pack unit. Complete overhaul that is up front. They landed the top-ranked offensive tackle, Jordan Seaton, to be the left tackle. A top-tier athlete who mirrors well in pass pro, shows nice punch. College football, we've had plenty of true freshmen the past few years struggle. Caden Proctor being the most recent example. So the expectations here is he's not going to be flawless. Up to about 6'5", 295. He'll certainly be an upgrade, though. Tyler Brown was good for Jackson State in 2022. Didn't see the field last year, but they're hoping he can also be an upgrade. Hank Zelinskas played a bit of center, but wasn't the worst. Was solid, but will battle with the undersized Ja'Kuri Walker, who's 6'2", 270. Started for UConn and was a solid player. I love the addition of Tyler Johnson from Houston. He was an elite pass blocker at 325 pounds the past 2 years, starting full-time at both guard spots. Justin Mayers has also been a pretty phenomenal pass blocker due to his time at UTEP, playing about 1,700 snaps at a high level at left guard. Upgrades across the board. Right tackle is a puzzle. Quill Benson, he was awful for Indiana last year. Wyatt Hummel wasn't anything special for Villanova. Has versatility. Offensive line is greatly improved. All I see is a big boost here. The upgrading competition for most of these guys, though, is something to monitor. This group will be much better than it was a season ago, Nick, where they were just awful. I mean, it was disgusting. The UCLA game, I thought it was going to be a disaster for them, playing one of the best defensive lines in college football. And, man, was it ugly. And, Deion was very vocal of it, too. You just got to get new linemen. And so they went over here and they overhauled all of it. Do you think it's going to work?
Horrendous offensive line last year. I think the overhaul will work. I think this is going to be one thing that I'm kind of high on this year is this offensive line potential here. I don't like a whole new unit. I don't like when any teams really have a whole new unit, basically, but I do think that they added some nice pieces here that do work for this offensive line. Obviously landing Jordan Seaton, top athlete, a 5-star, number 1 ranked offensive tackle in his class is a really solid ad. Obviously, he's going to be an incredible player, a really good player for them to have on the offensive line. Tyler Brown, I think he'll be solid. He was good at Jackson State, didn't really play last year. He could be really good this year as well. Hank Zelinskas at center is a guy that I think will be solid. You could plug him in there. He'll be okay. Tyler Johnson's a really good ad from Houston, an underrated ad. We talked about this in the offseason, a really incredible ad, one of the better ads out of the portal, a guy that's going to be really good. Khalil Benson, I think he can step up and be solid at right tackle as well. So I think there are some better pieces here. I think this offensive line is heading in the right direction finally.
The verdict for the Buffalo's offense is, this is a team with a lot of hype coming into the year on this side of the ball, and for good reason. The highly improved offensive line, great quarterback match of an elite room of pass catchers. Run game's still a toss-up, though. The group is thin, and the guys up front haven't always been sound. run blockers in their career, but they should see a nice jump in that area as well. Very strong offense here if those negatives can improve steadily. What's the grade you're going to give this offense, Nick? Because I know that's going to be all over the place, but I would certainly give it one that's pretty high.
Yeah, I think a B right now is what I look at for this offense. Maybe a B minus. I think this is an offense that is good. They just can't run the ball, and that's going to really continue to damage their grade for me. I think Sanders is an incredible electric quarterback. I think the wide receiver room has some really strong pieces, and I'm feeling good about the offensive line. I'm going to go probably a B on this offense right now. I just have so many concerns about the running back room, and I do worry about their ability to be able to compete with some of the bigger offenses in college football.
Now you look at the defensive side of the ball. This was a catalyst that really caused this team to stumble. 35 points per game. They were awful in the trenches here as well. They're just not good one bit. They did have 27 sacks, which was 63rd in FBS after a slow start. Get back 6 starters. Added 22 players in the portal. Lost 22 as well. Only added 6 players in their freshman class, though, on this side of the ball. The defensive line, massively improved unit. A lot of notes coming at you here, Nick. Davon Hayes was an exceptional player for Pittsburgh as a run defender and a quality pass rusher. He's been greatly consistent. I love the addition of an explosive pass rusher from Arizona State and B.J. Green. Some big upgrades there. They brought in Quincy Wiggins from LSU. Barely saw any snaps over 2 years. Was a top 50 recruit, though. Arden Walker is one of the lone returnees who wasn't all that bad. Samuel Okunlenlo wasn't good. He was very good for Pitt, especially as a run defender. Keaton Wade from Kentucky was good in spurts for Kentucky. Some great upgrades to this edge department. The interior offensive line, probably not as great. Shane Coates was solid but failed to get into the backfield at 6'3", 275. Chidozie Nwankwo was a great 4-year run stopper at Houston. 5'11", 290, though I'd consider that a tad undersized. Anquan Barnes only saw a few snaps for Alabama as an ex-4-star. Does have some sought-after size, though, at 6'5", 315. Amari McNeil provided some help as an interior rusher. Rayan Buell, only 277, but did make his name known against the run for Ohio. And then Ron Carter from Arkansas provided some nice juice for the Hogs in the SEC. Greatly revamped defensive line. I think the size on the interior is still a bit concerning, but a lot more impactful bodies here join the fold, Nick. And I certainly think the upside in the trenches on this side is also as good as the offense.
There is some room here for improvement on the trenches. I do think they have built up this defensive side of the ball. Not too bad at all. Amari McNeil's a solid return. 31 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Your top returning sack getter. A guy that was really solid in getting after the quarterback last year. Shane Coates, a really good run stopper in the middle. 29 total tackles for him last year. Arden Walker, 12 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him. And rotational pieces, I like him as nice depth coming off the edge there. I think he's a solid player. Deion Hayes from Pittsburgh is a really good add. Quincy Wiggins, I like to see him break out. Previously at LSU, I think he's in line for a pretty solid season. B.J. Green, a nice add from Arizona State who could step up as well. Keaton Wade, underrated add from Kentucky. I think he's really good on the edge. I like the pressure and the speed he can provide. I like the direction that this defensive line is going.
You look at the middle of this defense, linebacker was certainly a big struggle area for them. Levante Bentley was a quite sound player as a wrap-up tackler, but he was poorer in terms of positioning against the run, was a liability in coverage. Trevor Woods, he was one of the only guys that returned from, the roster before Deion showed up. He's going to make that full-time transition to linebacker after being a good safety for them for years. His final 4 games came in the middle, and he struggled mightily against the run. He was just no good, Nick, but I think this is a skilled, aggressive player. I'm confident he'll improve a great deal at his new position. Obviously, Wade and Okolanloa will be assets in the Buck outside linebacking position. They also have Jalen Wester, who arrives from FAU. Has proven to be a tremendous run defender. He's only played 350 snaps each of the last 2 seasons, though. So he should be comfortable in any role, though. Brendan Gant, a reserve as well, only played a few snaps. This is a linebacking group that also should probably be better, Nick, but if Woods really doesn't make the improvements he should, then they could really be in a lot of trouble because he's going to play a lot of snaps regardless.
Woods is going to play a ton of snaps for this team, and he has to be a lot better this year. He did not live up to the expectations and the hype that I had for him last year. Really did struggle and obviously battle injuries. 56 total tackles, 2 interceptions, 3 pass breakups. He's got to be better this year. That's basically the big story in the linebacker room for me. Levante Bentley, he's a really good returning tackler. 68 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. Good numbers there. A really nice, productive linebacker, hard-hitting, 2 pass breakups as well. I like what I've seen out of him. He's definitely the best player on the linebacking unit for me. Brandon Gant as well is a guy that didn't really do a whole lot last year. He returns. He could be involved. This year they made some different moves in the portal, adding a few different players. Jalen Wester is really the big name you want to highlight from FAU. Is what's he going to look like? Is he going to be good as a run defender? This linebacking unit's very hit or miss, but they do have some nice building blocks here, in my opinion.
In the secondary, this was also a group that allowed, a tremendous amount of yards towards the bottom of college football, but they should certainly be better. And obviously it starts with Travis Hunter, the All-American at corner. showcased those aforementioned ball skills and the athletic ability. Did a good job in zone of being able to cover large distances. Did have some struggles in coverage at times in a few games, but he's a real standout here. At the other cornerback spots, DJ McKinney was a solid player for Oklahoma State. Not the best run defender, but gained good experience last year as a starter for the Pokes. In terms of depth, it's kind of scarce. Ivan Yates played a good bit at Furman. R.J. Johnson, who didn't play at Arkansas, arrives. Colton Hood, a pretty shocking transfer from Auburn. The Buffs got him. Look for him to be a breakout. Preston Hodge, he was an elite player for Liberty, likely going to be on the slot. And then they added the guy Herman Smith, who was no good for Idaho State. So the quarterback room should certainly be improved. Depth might be tested, though. Safety group also features some nice upside. Shiloh Sanders, he's a good player, was the leading tackler, wasn't ever really abused in coverage. We'll need to showcase more plays on the ball, though. Cameron Silman Craig has some issues in coming over from Jackson State, where he was a high-end player at the FCS level, started all year long, showed great ball skills, certainly needs to make those improvements in coverage, at least in terms of consistency. Depth isn't all that great here. They have Carter Stroudemeyer, mainly played corner last year, and then Jay Travis barely saw the field as well. You look at the starters, though, Nick, and I'm pretty confident the secondary can make the improvements, but it's really going to start with scheming, because last year, just too much open space. And, the Stanford game, for example, Travis Hunter got absolutely abused in that one. Those things can't happen at the same time, Nick, and I don't think you'll see that as often this year, but if it continues, just too much free space, too many chunk plays, too much easy yardage for the opponent, and that's why they struggled so bad.
That was certainly a big problem for this defense, was too much free space. They gave way too many big plays. Shiloh Sanders, your top returning tackler, 70 total tackles of interception that he did return for a touchdown and 3 pass breakups. Travis Hunter, I love what he can do on defense. I keep saying I think he should be a full-time defensive player. I think he's a really strong player, 30 total tackles, 3 interceptions, 5 pass breakups. Really good in coverage, a really strong coverage asset, a guy that knows football, a nice hard-hitting player as well. Silman Craig is a really solid player, 44 total tackles, 3 interceptions, 2 pass breakups as well. They've made some nice moves in the portal, added some decent pieces. DJ McKinney, Preston Hodge are 2 really solid adds that can really be involved early on for this team. I think, Hodge from Liberty is a really, really nice add. He was really strong elite player for them. Colton Hood, a player from Auburn that was a shocking add, a really strong player as well. I think the secondary unit will improve this year.
Looking at the verdict for this defense, all eyes are going to be on this side of the ball for Colorado as they make some splashes in terms of upgrading the D-line. Secondary has good experience of an elite player leading the charge. You just don't want to jump the gun on the hype train just yet, as this linebacking core still figures to be a big liability. And scheming will need to be better, and a lot better in terms of seeing improvements. As there's just way too much free space available for opponents. I think they'll certainly improve. At what level remains to be seen, Nick, especially when they're switching conferences. This team just doesn't really strike you as having too many bright defensive minds that will lead to massive improvements in year 2. What's your final opinion on this side of the ball?
I think Robert Livingston's a very interesting and kind of unique hire. Been in the NFL for the past 10 years. Kind of an odd hire. There are some really solid individual pieces here. Sanders, Hunter are really good players. Trevor Woods, if he can step up and be solid this year, that could be a really good player for this team. I like the revamp work they did on the front part of this defense. The linebacking room, I'm a little worried about in the secondary. I do like the secondary, but I think they got to focus and figure out the scheming a little bit. This is a defense that's very hit or miss for me this year. They were atrocious last year. I think they'll be better this year. I think they certainly will find a way to improve a little bit, but I just don't know how much of an improvement we're going to be looking at, right? What are they going to cut that points per game total down to? What are they going to cut down the yards per game through the air, the yards per game in general? What are those numbers going to look like coming out of the season? It's really hard to tell.
We'll get the final prediction for the Buffaloes. And I completely understand the roster turnover. This is a program that is really in need of it. But at some point, you got to anchor down and build some continuity within your program. And it just doesn't seem very evident with Colorado right now. This offense, I think, will be very good. Kind of like last year, expect them to put up points. And I think they'll do so at a better tune this year with an improvement, on the ground game, the offensive line. The receiving core will be very good. Defensive side of the ball, Nick, I love the attention they have given to it. Especially on the D-line in terms of beefing up in the trenches. But again, I think this is a defense that will probably still have some issues, at least in the middle and against the run. And I think the secondary will be better. But again, with the scheming, it just remains to be seen how much better they will be, because regardless of talent, you got to put them in positions to execute. I think with Colorado right now, this is a team that's going to face a very tough schedule. They still have to prove that they can actually put these pieces all together, Nick, because, a lot of teams, you see it with the portals, just putting a lot of names on the roster. They're going to be good, and that doesn't always lead to great success. And I think with Colorado, this is a team that has hefty expectations. Even when they're not playing that good of football, they still seem distracted. We're not Colorado haters by any means. I think Deion Sanders is, a great personality for college sports. But this team has to go out and prove it, Nick. I see a lot of 9-win predictions for Colorado. There's nothing about this team that screams 9 wins. They have to go out and prove that they can be a good football team and do it consistently. Last year, though, they did play a lot of games closer than they probably should have. After they got blown out by Oregon, the rest of the year, they played a tremendous amount of close games. Arizona, Oregon State, UCLA, Utah. They're playing very good football teams, very close, and I think that's certainly some momentum they could ride into this season. But again, Nick, there's no real continuity from last year transferring over here, so that's not a given.
Last year's Colorado team was a Hollywood filmmaker's dream. You saw all the story, you saw all the headlines, all the talk. ESPN loving this story. They started off like a house on fire, and then they cooled off very quickly, getting water dumped on them as they limped their way to a slow 4-8 season. Obviously, things, there's high expectations, right? When Deion's in town, you're going to have high expectations, but I really don't think the expectations are going to be met this year. This is a tough schedule when you look at it. I'm at 4-8. They're going to lose that game to Kansas State as the one that I flip. At Nebraska, that's a very tough game. Nebraska, I think, is a very strong team. I mean, even look at League One, North Dakota State. They're a very good team, obviously FCS level, but they're a previous dynasty that was winning national championships. I know they haven't won a national championship in a couple years, and they've gone through some coaching changes recently, but they're still an incredibly strong FCS program. That's a game you certainly want to keep your eye on August 29th if you're looking at it from a betting standpoint as well, looking at potentially taking North Dakota State's points there. I think that's certainly something you got to look at. At Arizona is not going to be easy. At Kansas, at UCF, all difficult games. At Texas Tech, that could be a difficult game as well. Tough games at home against Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and Utah, plus Baylor and Kansas State, a game, again, I think they're going to lose to the Wildcats. This is a fun team, right? There's no doubt about that, but is it going to be able to produce results? I don't think either coordinator hire was a good hire. Pat Sherman, previously failed as a head coach of the Giants, had a tough tenure there. Livingston, I'm not entirely sure what the vision is. Really bringing in two former NFL guys here for Deion. I don't really know what the vision. I thought both coordinators last year were pretty solid, so I don't really know why they felt the need to make the aggressive change they did, but that's kind of what Colorado is. Just change for the sake of making change. It feels like bringing in different guys, sending guys out, kicking guys in, kicking guys out, for the sake of it, really, at this point in time. Expect another circus act this year. Can they get results? It's possible with the roster they have. Do I think they're going to get results this year? No.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly find that odd. Again, you see guys like Dylan Edwards transferring really for no reason. I thought this was your dream, was to play for, Deion and this staff. And, we praised the coordinator hires last year. We were very excited for them, and they didn't last, a couple of months before they were gone. Sean Lewis was a very good offensive coordinator, and he's doing everything he can with the personnel, and they want to go ahead and point fingers at the offensive play caller. Just doesn't seem like the right moves, and this offense completely stumbled throughout the rest of the year, even though they did play close competitive games. There was a lot of times where they were held under 260 yards, and they just could not move the football one bit. So I think, again, Colorado is going to be an exciting team to watch this year. It would be fun. I think college football will be very exciting if this was a competitive football team. I think they will be competitive this year, winning a few more games. Or at least in contention to do so. And I do have them upsetting Kansas State October 12th. I think that's a big opportunity for them there. 5-7 for me, 4 wins for you, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me, breaking down the Buffaloes.
Certainly a fun team, certainly a circus act that you want to keep your eye on. What will this team look like this year? Only time will tell.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.